It's a pleasure to be joined today by Ben Cohen, co-founder of the great Ben and Jerry's and also head stamper at Stamp Stampede, which is working to get money out of politics, reduce the influence of big money in the political system. This is such an important issue. I've been talking about this for years, and finally more people are discussing it. You've been worried about money in politics for a long time.
That would be correct. Yeah, I mean, clearly it's the gateway drug to all that's wrong with our political system. I mean, no matter what issue you're interested in, whether it's the environment or education or housing or taxes or Wall Street or student debt, they all have their roots in corporations and the wealthiest 0.01% bribing our politicians through campaign donations to pass or not pass laws that benefit them and screw everybody else.
That's exactly right. And I've even talked to people who say, well, David, it's money in politics, but it's also media coverage of whatever issue you're talking about. To which I say, well, but money is influencing the coverage we see in media. So it really is money no matter what.
It really is money no matter what. I mean, this is a system that John McCain has called legalized bribery. It's totally corrupt. Politicians are doing the bidding not of the voters, but of the people who finance their campaigns.
I don't know if you saw a recent study from Princeton, but it actually seeked to analyze whether we really have a sort of representative democracy. In other words, is the mean of the desires of the average voter actually represented by our elected officials? And it turned out, in fact, exactly what you're saying is true. If you're a big corporation or you're a wealthy individual, your legislative desires are far more likely to become the law than if you're just the average individual with a mean income, the average income in this country. So quite literally, we don't really have a level playing field.
That's exactly right. And like you say, the study that you're talking about proves it. The people with the money get what they want. Everybody else doesn't.
And talk to me a little bit about what paths forward we have on this, because we sometimes hear from political candidates, oh, I will reform campaign finance or I'll change the status quo. But ultimately, if they get elected, they were elected under that status quo system. They came to power under that system. There's not a very strong incentive for them to actively work to change the system that got them into power, is there?
Yeah, I think the only thing that's really going to work here is public demand. There's all the gridlock in Congress, there's all the bullshit that goes on there, but the reality is that when the public really demands something, Congress has to act. And that's what the Stampede is about, is showing visible, long-lasting grassroots public demand to get money out of politics and return our country to a democracy.
And I want to talk about the stamps and Stamp Stampede, but before we do that, one of the specific paths forward that Stamp Stampede has identified is this possibility of a constitutional amendment, which declares two things: one, money is not free speech, and two, corporations are not people. And our friend Tom Hartman has been talking about this, and our friends at the Young Turks have been talking about this. Is this really a viable path forward? Not in the sense that would it work if it happened, but rather, is it realistic to think it could be achieved?
Yeah, I think it's definitely realistic. It's a long-term goal. I mean, I think it's probably going to take about 10 years for this amendment to pass. It's notable that 16 states have already voted in favor of an amendment to the Constitution to get money out of politics. There's currently a major effort underway in Arkansas, which would be the first state in the South to pass a resolution like that. And there's another effort in the state of Washington. So it's moving, it's gathering momentum. I mean, it's kind of amazing that seven of the presidential candidates have all spoken out in favor of this amendment. But there's also things that can be done until the amendment gets passed, and that is to pass legislation on both the state and federal level that is essentially a small donor matching system, so that candidates agree to just take money from small donors, and then the money that they raise is matched 6 to 1. And that's enough for candidates to opt into that system. So laws like that are on the books currently in Connecticut, Arizona. Maine is about to strengthen theirs, and also in the city of New York.
And this is really the nitty gritty of why local politics matters so much, because it's much easier as an individual to influence what happens at your local level than maybe which senator is elected in your state, or certainly who the president is. And at that same local level, you can actually achieve some pretty big wins with regard to money in politics in the ways you're describing.
Yeah, it's also important to point out that about 650 municipalities have passed resolutions in favor of this amendment, and that effort is ongoing. And that's the kind of thing that puts pressures on states to pass state level legislation, and then puts pressure on the federal government to pass federal legislation.
Last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll get into the specifics of Stamp Stampede. Is it important to, in conjunction to be lobbying for the types of change you're talking about legislatively, to also be supporting financially alternatives to the sort of status quo corporate media? Because lots of alternative media, including Thom Hartmann, including our program, etc., are very proactively talking about this issue. But this issue is barely mentioned on the advertiser-driven corporate media. So is that also a valuable way to sort of influence this discussion?
I think it's incredibly important. Yeah, it's amazing to me how little the corporate media reports on the most important issues that are facing us. I mean, the corporate media is pretty much reporting a bunch of gossip, a bunch of gotcha journalism, but titillating stuff like what you might find in the National Enquirer, but they're not talking about the real issues. And it's really interesting that the corporate media is being eclipsed by the alternative media on the web.
All right, let's talk about Stamp Stampede. People can find out more at stampstampede.org. And part of this initiative is literally to be stamping money with a message to get money out of politics.
That's right. We just crossed the 50,000 stamper threshold. This is, although it's totally legal to stamp paper currency, everybody was brought up with the idea that you can't deface money. But the reality is that when you look at the actual federal regulation, they describe defacing as obliterating the currency so that it can no longer be used. And that's certainly not what we're doing. Here's a picture. Can you see this photo of a stamped dollar bill?
Yes, indeed.
Can you read what it said?
Not to be used for bribing politicians.
Exactly. And so we've also got other stamps that say stamp money out of politics, or not to be used for buying elections. And it's so powerful. I mean, it's very similar to an alternative media, because this is the original viral marketing. As money gets passed around, once you put $1 into circulation, 875 people see it. as it gets passed around over the next 2.5 years, which is the lifespan of the bill. And, the numbers are amazing. I mean, one person stamping 3 bills a day for a year generates 1 million impressions. One person, literally 1 million impressions in a year, just by stamping 3 bills a day. And it's pretty easy, it's pretty quick, and it's kind of fun.
It is very interesting, and people can find out more and get the stamps at stampstampede.org. Before we let you go, we're of course speaking with... Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
It's going to air during the month of July.
Absolutely.
Well, July, in honor of the birth of our nation, is Pay What You Can month at the Stamp Stampede. So you just go to stampstampede.org and maybe I need to give you a link or something. I think if you contact Ed.
Yeah, we'll make sure to put it up for everybody.
He'll give you the link to the Pay What You Can feature, and you just decide how much you want to pay for the stamp, and it's yours.
All right, before we let you go, we're of course speaking with Ben Cohen, co-founder of Ben & Jerry's. Do you still consume a lot of ice cream these days?
Oh, yes. I've recently, I used to be a confirmed Cherry Garcia fan.
Oh, me too.
And I've recently switched, and now I'm eating around, and I'm doing a lot of pistachio. I'm doing the new salted caramel core and chunky monkey. What can I say? I'm aging. I don't know what the heck it is, but.
And do you has that always been your thing, where you're mostly on like 2 or 3 flavors? You don't vary from that at a time?
Well, it used to be I was just on Cherry Garcia, and before that I was just on New York Super Fudge. Before that I was on Heath Bar Crunch.
All right, Ben Cohen, co-founder of Ben & Jerry's. Please check out stampstampede.org, and we'll make sure to provide a link to the Pay What You Can feature that Ben told us about. Thank you so much for being on and telling us about it.
Good talking to you, David. Take care.